Untuk itu, kerajaan memutuskan untuk melaksanakan Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan mulai 18 Mac 2020 iaitu lusa hingga 31 Mac 2020 di seluruh negara.
BEEB1013 Principles of Economics Group AA10 Future Report Title Inflation During Pandemic COVID-19. To members of the team, Maizurah binti Zakaria, Tan Zuyun, Tan Ziyi, Nur Murshidah, and Nur Atika. Enjoy the mini documentary.
The Malaysian government is under increasing pressure from people over the rising cost of living and inflation. Opposition parties and student groups are taking to the streets regularly to voice their frustration. And among the demands, more aid to the people, continued provision of subsidies and price controls for food. Melissa Go with the story.
Inflation happening, it all goes back to supply and demand. The price of something is a balancing act between these two factors. Let's take beef, for example. When COVID struck, meat production slowed dramatically as farmers had to scale back their operations. Transportation costs and a labor shortage has made it even harder to produce beef, reducing supply and raising the price of a pound of steak more than 18%.
Today I would like to talk about inflation of living costs, about background and through the issue. Background of inflation, the cost of living index of Malaysia in 2020 until year 2022, including medical, food, transportation, housing, and so on. In 2020, transportation group will decrease by 10%. This is likely because of COVID-19 and people cannot move around freely. Consumer power rate will unchanged for the most part of 2021. Therefore, the cost of living index also track the rest of basic life expense over time from different regions. Also, done by calculating all the cost of living in different cities. The rate of change in price of goods and service are the only factors taken into account by the CP1 inflation. Whereas, change in the cost of living also take into account the income perspective. Price increase are not the only reason that household. And the last, according to Bank Negara Malaysia, the average cost of living in Malaysia is 58.6 lower than US. This report not only examines the cost of the increase in the cost of living and its effects, but also provides some cooling principle to deal with the issue as well.
Makanan naik, ayam hidup pun naik. Bila kita ambil ayam hidup, harganya pun akan naik. Kita pun terpaksa naikkan ikut diorang punya harga juga.
Amid the COVID-19 recession and a strict movement control order, unemployment in Malaysia has hit a 27-year high. The Merdeka Centre says 5 to 8% more Malaysians will fall into poverty because of the pandemic. That is as many as 2.4 million people. Who are these new poor?
One of the best thing of living in Port Dickson is you have the beach at your backyard. First, you don't get this in KL.
Kuala Lumpur-based Malek is a cameraman who works in commercials, feature films and documentaries. But with freelance jobs all dried up, his family has relocated to Port Dickson, where they survive by selling home-cooked food.
This year, 2020 to me is a year of humility and empathy. Seriously. All the while we've always been in the comfort zone. We forgot that little things in life that make us happy. You really do not need to go out. You spend more time with your family. If you're able to earn 5 ringgit a day, it's good enough really. You're happy. You don't need to earn 5 million a day to be happy. These basic things. So that is what I tend to realize. And because we've got 3 months at home to sit and think and then reflect.
There are other city-dwelling Malaysians like him who have moved back to rural areas or their hometowns, where life is simpler and cheaper.
The only way for us to get job now is to reduce. We cannot be going around saying, oh, this is my rate, you pay me. No, let's say thank you very much, we get other ones. Yeah.
I think we can't go on living the way we do, in very materialist culture. At the end of the day, human lives matter, family matters, and that's the most important thing of all.
But the hardest hit by this pandemic recession are those in the bottom 40%, the B40. Fakhruddin Jazmi was left to raise his 6 children alone after his wife died of breast cancer in February 2019. Exactly 1 year later, he opened his own auto mechanic workshop, which he'd always dreamed of. But 1 month later, the MCO happened.
Kesannya memang sangat dalam lah. Maksudnya, kita baru nak meningkat, tiba-tiba PKP. Memang daripada pendapatan tu ada, terus kosong. Jadi kita tak boleh nak survive. Memang saya akan risau jugalah untuk meneruskan hidup masa tu.
Assalamualaikum.
A friend alerted a welfare group to his situation and they began bringing his family food every day.
Pak Kadir ni adalah satu kes saya yang boleh dikatakan menyentuh perasaan lah. Sebab ketiadaan isterinya dalam waktu masa tu kita sambut raya kan. Dia selalu mengadu dengan saya bila dia kata anak dia terlampau rindukan arwah kan.
Help has also been forthcoming from the government, which introduced a wage subsidy and cash handouts to struggling households as part of 4 economic stimulus packages, totaling some US $75 billion. But can it do enough?
When the borders closed and the numbers dropped to zero and the reality sunk in.
In Sabah, one of Malaysia's poorest states, nearly 1 in 5 residents live below the poverty line, and many had relied on tourism. One of Sundakan's oldest hotels, NAK, closed after hosting its last guests in June, a day that its owners captured.
So, it's about 3 p.m. now. Our signboard has come down.
Bos kami, Mr. Anton, announce yang kami akan tutup. Memang semua staff shock lah. Sebab efek pandemik ni memang sukar, terutamanya untuk mencari kerja lain lah. So bila yang hotel sudah since 66 sudah membangun tiba-tiba tutup, macam satu kehilangan besar lah untuk Sandakan.
Our main concern was always our employees, because when you work in the hospitality and F&B industry, a lot of them are B40 families. A lot of them are breadwinners. Let's figure them out first. What are we going to do? What are we going to offer to them? And then deal with the emotions later.
For me personally, it's sentimental because it's named after my grandfather.
As more businesses close, how many more Malaysians will be left jobless?
We're here tonight to help look for our street friends. There's about 474 packets of food.
Kachera Soup Kitchen is run by volunteers who feed the homeless in KL.
The situation before pandemic is very different. We are seeing a lot of poor people, no doubt about it. But after MCO, we are seeing more and more people becoming more struggled.
I think for the most part, the Malaysian government realizes the extent of the problem. And I think they are trying to be quite prudent in the way that they are trying to address it. The question now is whether or not all of these efforts is enough to counter factors that are beyond the control of the Malaysian government, which is the global economy and also the strength of the country's trading partners.
Critical analysis on the chosen periodical data and appropriate information.
In economics, inflation means an increase in the general price level of goods and services in economy from time to time. Inflation rate refers to the percentage change in the price of goods from one year to the next. Through inflation rate, we can identify how much the price increase and decrease goods every year, especially during COVID-19. During this period of crisis, a lot of study has been done on how this pandemic has changed the economy and how it is changing how we think about financial and economic problems in times of trouble. Inflation is one of the economic problems faced by a country that always attracts the attention of the people because it is seen as an indicator of the stability of the economy of a country. This is because when the rate of inflation increases, the purchasing power of consumers will decrease. And if the rate of inflation decreases, the purchasing power of the people will increase, which will basically have an effect directly on the cost of living of the people. In theory, inflation will affect consumer purchasing power and saving ability among consumers. The household has to allocate higher expenses than before, especially for daily expenses. The Consumer Price Index (CPI) is a statistical measure of the average price of goods and services, which is the main measure to determine the rate of inflation in a country. Figure 1 shows the trend of the inflation rate, which increased every year from 2020 until 2022. For 2022, the inflation rate is seen to increase to 3.8% compared to 2.5% in 2021. The effect of the implementation of the Movement Control Order (PKP) 2.0 and 3.0 in the beginning and middle of 2021, causing the inflation rate to have increased significantly to 2.5% compared to 2020, which is negative 1.2%. Based on Figure 2, among the groups that experienced a decrease in significant price in 2020 is the transport group, which is negative 10.0%, followed by housing group, water group, electricity, gas and fuel, negative 1.7%, and group clothes and shoes, negative 0.8%. Although inflation in 2020 is negative, there is the group that is in the positive range, which is various goods and services, 2.7%, followed by food and beverage, 1.3%. Inflation for food and beverage is the lowest inflation rate recorded in a decade. The highest inflation for this group was in 2011 with a rate of 4.8%. This shows when the country is still struggling with hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Here I will be explaining about the shift in expenditure shares during the MCO period. The source from Department of Statistics Malaysia and Bank Negara Malaysia estimates. The figure above display a bar graph displaying the shift in expenditure during the MCO period in Malaysia as compared to the period before. Food and non-alcoholic beverage accounted for nearly 50% of the total percentage after the shift during the MCO period. Despite the enactment of the MCO, there has been a surge in purchasing activity, occasionally referred to as panic buying, due to the mandate controls.
Major supermarket operators, meantime, have urged Malaysians to avoid panic buying. The appeal comes after shoppers cleared the shelves in some supermarkets, leaving them without bread, rice or eggs.
As we can refer from the video before, we can see that when people go shopping, their primary focus is on purchasing groceries, as these items are essential for the household, particularly when they are unable to leave their homes due to the increasing number of COVID cases. And at the moment, the purchasing power of individuals is mainly shifting towards essential goods rather than non-essential or luxury items. From the bar graph above, it is clearly illustrates that the expenditure share for restaurants and hotels and clothing and footwear is the lowest on the graph. This indicates that individuals are not spending a significant amount on these sectors during MCO. As we can see now, the graphic shows Malaysia's monthly inflation rate from January 2019 to July 2020. From March 2020 to April 2020, the Consumer Price Index (CPI) declined. As we know, at the moment, it is clear that every sector was affected by the sudden pandemic. The sectors that contribute to this inflation, the food sector, utilities sector, transport sector, education sector, and restaurant and hotel sectors. This situation is also causing many businesses to offer lower prices in an attempt to bring back more demand. Additionally, it could have been due to the decline in global oil prices, which resulted in more affordable energy costs during that time. There is also an obvious drop in prices in the utilities sector as well as in the restaurant and hotel sector.
Here at an eatery in Kuala Lumpur, it's not business as usual, as no dine-in is allowed. They can only serve takeouts or food delivery.
Office, semua staff semua dah tak ada. So people walk around also dah kurang. So business really go down, 90%.
Now, the government also provides subsidies for people on utility bills in order to help those in need and businesses during that time. On the other hand, the restaurant and hotel sectors react to economic efforts by offering lower and more competitive prices in order to boost demand, especially between the months of June and July 2020. At this time, the government reduced the implementation of the Movement Control Order (MCO) due to the fact that the number of COVID-19 infections was largely controlled.
Government policies that have been implemented regarding this issue.
Since the launching of Movement Control Order (MCO) in March 2020, Malaysia has been through different stages of lockdown as the government's effort to combat COVID-19. Malaysia's gross domestic product (GDP) has fallen by 17.1% as a result of the impact of COVID-19 indirectly. During this period, many businesses could not operate during the MCO and many people lost their jobs. The launch of Great Lockdown involved a combination of shock and surprise for both supply and demand chains. During the early recovery stage, the Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) decided to reduce the overnight policy rate (OPR) by 0.25 basis point to 1.75% on 7 July 2020. The purpose is to boost recovery rate and at the same time further stimulate Malaysia's economy. In addition, with the help of a proactive measure of Prihatin SME Plus and National Economy Recovery Plan (PENJANA), the government believed that it would be able to rebuild the economy by generating more job opportunities, restoring customer and investor relationship. In addition, the 12th Malaysian Plan 12 MP was unveiled in 2020 by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dato Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, with the objective of a prosperous, inclusive, sustainable Malaysia, reflecting the starting of a new phase in the journey of Malaysia development. This plan will be focusing on three aspects, which are resetting the economy, enhancing security, well-being and inclusivity, and advancing sustainability. In resetting the economy, the government catalyzed in high-impact industries such as electrical and electronic, global service aerospace, tourism and more to boost up the economic growth. In other words, this industry will be focused on producing sturdy and high-quality products. Then, in an effort to enhance the security, well-being and inclusivity, assistance will be given to all civilians regardless of their ethnicity, gender, races, and socio-economic status. For instance, initiative on need basis will be primarily given to those needy among the bottom 10% of the household income group. Furthermore, less developed states such as Kedah, Perlis, Terengganu, Sabah, and Sarawak will be focused to reduce the development gaps by allocating more basic needs projects such as construction of schools, hospitals, and roads. Moreover, in alignment with advanced sustainability, the circular economy model will be applied to combat the circumstances of equating both social and economic development and environmental sustainability. Hence, both public and private sectors are encouraged to operate and adopt sustainable development goals (SDGs) when making decisions. 2020, Malaysia once again made a big move by extending the subsidy for the poultry industry until the end of 2022 with an initiative to help re-stabilize the prices of whole chicken and eggs. As the poultry industry struggles last until June with skyrocketing costs of production, the government implements some solution to assuage fears of poultry shortage by consistently extending the subsidy and banning export of all chicken starting 1st of June 2022.
Opinion and suggestion. Opinion. Malaysia's current inflation rate is comparatively low. Suggestion. Government can enact laws pertaining to fiscal and monetary policy. Second opinion. Cut back on frivolous spending and concentrate on necessities in order to lessen the negative effects of growing costs on the whole financial health. The suggestion. Creating a budget and tracking your expenses to identify areas where you can cut back.
The last is conclusions. In conclusion, the minimum value was 1.2% in 2022 and the maximum is 3.8% in 2020 because they are still struggling with hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their job due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The cost of living is putting pressure on people who have lost their source of income. The government of Malaysia have launched a few plans and policies to help with the recovery of the economy and reduce the financial stress of the public. The government should pay attention to the problem of inflation and take appropriate action to reduce the burden and protect the welfare of the people. They must rest confident of investment so that more job opportunities will appear for those who need a job.